this is going to be a really special show. There's been a lot of controversy over the last year and a half over H2O, water, right? And so Monday, big announcements. There were a couple of things that happened on Monday. The mayor makes a huge announcement that he is actually going to, that with the help of Essex County, they are actually financed the ability to get rid of all the privately owned lead lines in the city of Newark over a 2.5 year period of time. There were also protests that went on that Monday at the Newark VMAs, right? Like the Newark branch of the MTV Video Music Awards. So there's a lot going on, and you know, in all politics are local. We always want to try to unpack. We always want to try to bring clarity when there's confusion. And to help me do that, we have actually a good friend of mine, someone I've known for a very long time, a teacher in the city of Newark. He is the chair of the Newark Teachers Caucus. That means they've been fighting for years. They fought against Cami Anderson, and they fought against, you know, Surf and Chris Christie in terms of educational equity, which is what the new caucus does. He also has been a vocal person in the Newark Water Coalition. And so, welcome, Moassab.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate it, man.
All right, and we can give him a hand. All right. All right, cool. And so so right now, right, there's been a lot of controversy. There's been a lot of vitriol. There's been a lot of name calling, and one of the things that when I was looking at this, I was looking at the New York Times article. I'm listening to various activists, and there just seems to be like to me, it seems to be a disconnect between like the stuff the mayor's saying, the stuff that activists are saying. Activists are saying different things, right? And just some clarity, right? Like the protest on Monday, what was it about?
Well, I think different people were coming out. I mean, we had, you know, the Newark Water Coalition, which is still fighting to ensure that bottled water is given to everybody. I know one of the things we're fighting for still is for the Wanacue service area to be recognized and to be given the same relief as the Pequannock service area. That's a fight that we've been having, that we continue to struggle over. So that's one of the main things. Also,
what does that mean? Like,
okay,
because again,
yes,
a lot of this has to be unpacked, right?
Absolutely.
Because what I've heard is that the only areas that were affected were like the only areas that the only areas that were affected were the areas that you know, like the Ponticue line, right? Like that was the major area that was affected, and the other line, right, the Wanacue line, wasn't affected with that. Now, what is the evidence that it's been affected?
So, first of all, the Pequannock had the corrosion control stopped working there, right?
Right.
As far as we know, the Wanacue corrosion control is still working. However, there were gates that were open between the Pequannock and the Wanacue, so the water was mixing. And that's, even the city has admitted to that as far back as 2016, possibly earlier, the water has been mixing. And according to Water Director Adim's testimony in the latest hearing a couple weeks ago, those gates were finally closed in the end of 2017 or beginning of 2018. So throughout that time, the corrosion control in the Wanacue was being compromised.
But here's a question. Were there tests in the East Ward that showed that? Like what, because like a lot of it is like, you know, the city's like, we tested everywhere. Here's where they showed, you know, increased levels. And it seems like the actual testing that was done in one line was also, it seems like the Wanacue line did not show the same thing.
So when we went to court in December, and we asked the judge for relief at that point, filters, right, because that's what they were given in Pequannock, there were individual homes that were some well over 100 parts per billion in the Wanacue service area. The judge said, you know, I want to see the 90th percentile. From January to June of this year.
Were those homes that had lead lines in them? Like,
yes.
Were those homes on the list? Like,
yes.
Because there were 3,000 homes in the Wanacue area. And so those are the homes we're talking about.
I believe those homes, yes, had lead service lines. Now, from January to June of this year, and this was a number that was agreed upon by both the city and NRDC, that the parts per billion in the Wanacue service area were between 14.6 and 15.6, which is right around the federal action level. And over what the World Health Organization says is safe, right? Because the 15 parts per billion, you guys talked about that before, right?
Well, yeah. Well, in terms of if it's 15 or over, then there's no such thing as a safe
Yes,
level of lead in your
yes,
water.
that's what I was gonna
But
say.
15 or over is considered
Federal.
dangerous federally.
So
right?
the Wanacue from January to June was at 14.6 to 15.6.
And again, we're talking about the homes that had lead service lines. We're not talking about, like, let's, for clarity, right?
Mm-hmm.
The water source is clean. Like, in other words, the actual source of water.
From the Wanacue.
No.
From the
source of
place.
water, the
Okay,
reservoir.
yeah, okay.
Clean water,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
The actual pipes that lead from the reservoir to our homes, good, right? Like the activists agree on that.
The mains, you're saying?
Yeah,
the water
the
main. Yes, yes.
all
yes.
the water mains.
But to the service lines, to the home.
But what we're talking about, like because it took me a long time to figure this out. Even
Yeah.
in listening to a lot of the activists, they made it seem like can't drink the water, all your water's bad, the source is bad. I was hearing all this stuff, right? And part of the reason why I just wanted clarity is like so we can actually understand what is the scope of the problem. So even the activists agree the major water source is safe. And like in terms of the reservoir.
In terms of lead.
The reservoir, right,
Yes,
safe
in
from
terms of
lead,
lead.
right? We're yeah.
I'm not talking about, I don't,
Because we
I don't,
we
want-
didn't test
I don't want to
anything.
speak on other things like heliocetic acid and stuff like
But
that. Yeah.
right, but that's not right.
That's not
but
what
that's
we're
not part
talking
of the
about, right?
conversation,
Absolutely.
right? But in terms of like the lead contamination, that's the major water source is fine. The pipes that are leading up to your homes is fine, as in like there's no lead in those pipes. We are really only talking about 18,000 homes, 3,000 in the Wanacue, 15,000 in the other section, right?
Yes, but also we're talking about homes that have lead fixtures within the homes.
Right, and
So
those are
it could be,
right, and those are private lead fixtures inside the home. So, and again, the water is not going to hurt you, but your plumbing would, because your plumbing might infect your tap water. So, when we have the mayor people from the city on, they say everyone should test their water, and you agree with that?
Absolutely.
And if everyone tested their water, wouldn't that, like, I always thought that shouldn't really just be everybody test your water and see, do you have lead fixtures inside your house? Do you have like do you well you would know if you had one of the lead lines, but if you have an older house, you should test your water anyway because you might have lead fixtures in your house.
Yes. The only problem is that it could give out mixed messages if you're saying the Wanacue's not affected, potentially. Like, because if you're saying that it's not affected, why would I test my water?
Well, because
You know
you
what
might
I'm
have
saying?
lead fixtures.
Yeah, but if the corrosion control's working in the Wanacue, that shouldn't be as big. You know what I'm saying, though? That's where I feel like the messaging has been confusing to the eastern part of the city.
Well, because there's not been any conclusive. There's not been conclusion. There are no conclusions that the corrosion controls in the Wanacue has failed. Like there's no conclusion of that. Like we know that the corrosion controls have failed in one section. We do not know. And like there's no evidence that says they have failed in the other.
So then what's the January to June evidence shows that the lead levels in the Wanacue are increasing to 14.6 to 15.6 because of the mixture from the Paquonic.
And those are done in the homes that, so in other words, you're saying that there are homes with lead lines inside the Wanacue area that have been affected.
I assume we don't get the address. We're not allowed to look at the addresses of each home. I assume that they have lead lines. I don't want to say that every home that tested above 15 parts had lead lines. I'm assuming they do, but
because that's part of the confusion too, right? Like the confusion is like, well, what are the, because like a lot of these studies, it seems like they're testing 2 homes, 3 homes, right? And you're testing older homes. And that's why like part of what I always thought was the solution that made sense is everybody test your water because you actually may not know what the cause
Absolutely.
is, right? Like you can't definitively say this, like the corrosion controls have failed in Wanacue because you don't know that,
No.
right? You know that there was lead that was tested in certain homes there, right?
Mhm.
And so really it seems like people should test their water because there's a possibility that even if you don't have lead lines, that you have lead fixtures and that you have to test your water,
absolutely.
right?
Mhm.
So I think a lot of that gets lost, right? Like, and when I think that when there's like these debates about like panic and people talking about like the water in and of itself is bad, and I think that might be. I mean, I think that's scary because I actually didn't understand like until I was reading article after article, and even when I read the articles, they weren't really clear, right? Like I had no idea that the lead lines were all on private property.
Yeah, so that's one of the things we're also fighting, and I mean, we're glad that the lead service lines are going to be replaced for free, although we would have liked to seen federal funding come in so we don't have to pay back these loans and bonds. But one of the things we're fighting about is we still haven't seen any legislation. It's on private property, but the city, and this was 100 years ago,
right, like
forced residents to use lead service lines.
Right, you're talking about like before the 50s, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like you're talking about like in 1953, I think that's when like lead was banned in municipal pipes, whatever. And I think it was like the 80s where they actually outlawed something again that like the use of actually making lead service lines. I think if your home is made after 1986, then you are almost guaranteed not to have lead.
Yeah, and Newark would definitely, I think, stop that before the national law came into effect. However, residents were forced to use the lead service lines.
Like, and you're talking about like,
and this was
1920s,
1920s, 30s, early part. And so we were looking just for legislation that showed that we were responsible for the whole thing. Because that's what the argument is, right? And in some
well, actually, it's no longer right. And the argument, like nationally, the argument in the state, which is very different, is that the public should be responsible for private lines.
Yes.
And that has been an argument that really we've been losing up till now.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so, like, it seems like there's been something, like, I don't think people understand the monumental ground shift to publicly funding fixing private property to the tune of like $10,000 to $12,000 per homeowner. And like, it seems like, especially Monday, right? Like when there are the protests, that there would at least be some acknowledgement about like how really we have gone to a different level of understanding that even though these lead lines are on private property, they're a public health problem.
Absolutely.
And that the public sector managed to do something that, frankly, since the 1920s or 30s or 40s, right, like you were talking about, hadn't been done, right? Because like the perception is, like for me, the perception was when I first heard this is I thought the municipal pipes had lead in it. And I thought that's why there was a demand in terms of the city, because this was city property and the city lead lines, right? And these lead lines that had to be replaced. And I'm like, of course, right? But I had no idea that the whole reason why we're treating the water, et cetera, is, and treating the water with chemicals to coat lead, is because of the lead fixtures in private homes. Is there, like, I know that, so given that, what is the fight right now? Like, what is the fight actually right now? What is it about?
So besides giving the temporary relief in the Wanakee, right?
Right.
That's what we're still fighting.
And by that temporary relief is, like, acknowledge that people may need water, because, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think right now we should give water to the Wanakee, and let's say the July through December lead tests come back and they've dropped, because we think the Wanakee should drop. Now that the gates are closed, it should be solved soon. So if we can see that, then we're fine. But that's what we're fighting for.
All right. Well, when we had,
but besides that, and I think it's a larger issue. Like something I always say is, it's not just Newark, it's not just Mayor Baraka, it's capitalism, right? If we're talking about these lead service lines that need to be replaced throughout the country, then we're facing a $1.4 trillion military budget, $1.5 trillion tax cuts. These tax cuts are not just money that goes to individuals. They're taken from something. We don't have the funding for, we have people who walk around with billions of dollars in the world that their children and grandchildren will never spend, and we can't get clean water for Black and Latin communities. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I'm saying. We're trying to also change the focus of where these resources are allocated.
All right, and one of the things that in just even listening to you, and part of my confusion in terms of Monday's protest is, it seems like I don't know what the daylight is between what you're saying and what the mayor's saying, right? Like, as in, we had Rahman Muhammad on a few weeks ago. He's the deputy mayor. He's going to be on tonight later. And one of the things he said during this time was, anyone who wanted water can come up and get water. They would just have to agree to have their pipes tested. Like, it was the exact same thing you said, right? They would just have to agree to have their water tested to see if they had high rates, right? Now maybe that might have been like that in the beginning, but I think because of pushback and because of all sorts of conversations that were happening, right? Like, it was like, all right, if you want water, you can get water, but you have to agree to testing. That is the exact same thing you said. Like, where's the daylight between, and that would solve the Wanakee thing, right? Like, they would be able to get water. They would just have to get their stuff tested.
Absolutely, but I think, so we found out about that through Mr. Redeem's testimony in court. Like, that was never published anywhere. That was never put anywhere. And I'm still, like, when I was at Eastside today talking to people about their water, have you gotten your water tested? And they're like, no, the Wanakee's not affected. So there needs to be, I think, greater public education, particularly in the eastern, and it's not just the East Ward, it's the North, Central, South, and East Ward. So there's like a line that kind of runs down the side of Newark. In that whole area in the Wanakee, I think there needs to be greater public education then, because a lot of people don't know about it. And, you know, that's something that we need to get out.
And so, again, like, that doesn't seem like a major point of contention when the city's position is everyone should get their water tested and the city will do it for free, right? So if that is the solution for that, right? Like, everyone get your water tested, the city will do it for free. The activists are like, you need to make sure that people in the Wanakee test their water. It seems like, I don't know where you're not talking about the same thing, or even the solutions aren't the same at this point.
Well, I think the other thing too, and I don't want to speak for, you know, the activists. There's a lot of other issues.
There's a coalition.
Right? And I'm really here sort of representing Newark Education Workers Caucus, more so than Newark Water Coalition. There's a lot of people who are a lot more involved in that. But I also think the other issues that we're trying to, like, there has been, and this may, and like I said, for me, this is not all about the mayor. This has been a struggle, I feel, for a year and a half to really get the word out. But for me, where has Menendez, where has Cirrus, where has Payne, where has Booker, where have they, on the federal level, where have they tried to help us? You know what I'm saying? In terms of getting that federal funding. Like Flint, Pittsburgh, they immediately got their lead service lines replaced, you know, for free. And that's something that I think on a federal level, we're not getting that support. You saw how Newark went real hard for Menendez at the last election.
Right.
Really hard. What has he done for us since then? You know what I'm saying? So for me, it's not just that. You know, it's not just about the mayor, but it's about how the response has been nationally as well.
So you're saying that, like, federal government should do more, a lot more. And again, I think that is an agreement on a local level. I think everybody agrees, right? Like,
they might agree, but there's not a lot of pressure. At least I don't feel like there's been a lot of pressure. You know what I'm saying?
But with that, right?
Yeah.
Like, it seems like everyone's speaking the same, everyone's coming to the same conclusions, but there's a sense that there's a lot of division. And again, everything you're saying, I think, is agreed at on, especially with the mayor, in terms of, like, pressure, like the letter he released to Trump that's like, hey, we need federal funding, not to build a wall, right? Like, then when we had conversations with Payne on the show, he talked about infrastructure and trying to get more money with infrastructure and trying to get an infrastructure bill passed, right? Like, and, you know, the difficulty of getting an infrastructure bill passed. And he's talking about not just for, like, you know, this issue. He's talking about, like, the tunnels are in trouble, right? Like, the basic infrastructure in this region is actually in trouble. And the conversation he has is like, yes, that is something that's being pushed in Congress to try to get Trump to sign with Republicans. But, like, I don't, part of me is thinking that, like, traditionally, when the ACLU had problems with police brutality, they sued the city, right? They sued Cory Booker's administration, but then they became involved and heavily in the police reforms that took place later, like the Civilian Complaint Review Board is probably one of the most progressive in the country, and it's one of the most progressive in the country because the activists were a part. They worked with the city in order to, like, make that happen, right? Are the activist organizations, like you spoke earlier, like you were like, the EPA standard is one thing, and there's a federal standard, but then there's the World Health Standard, right? it seems like the activists would work with the local government to try to like push, like, hey, these EPA standards aren't good enough. Let's have a conversation about working with the world standards. Let's talk about like what we can do. How can we influence what we do with these policies? When we could get involved? When should people get water? Right? Like it just seems like it seems like there's a lot of heat in the conversation, and my question is, how productive is the heat when it seems like we're treating each other like enemies when, I don't know, like on the substance of it, it doesn't seem like the city and the activists are enemies.
Well, listen, I know there might be a lot of heat, but that heat brought lead service lines to be replaced for free, right? Like, and the city's working on it. But once again, the only thing I'm concerned about is the way we're replacing these lead service lines are through bonds and through loans.
Right.
So does that mean that we, the taxpayers of Newark, are going to eventually pay for those later on? You know what I'm saying? I don't know, and I haven't seen the details of the loan. But that's where I'm saying, like, why aren't we getting grants from the federal government? Where are we fighting on a higher level to make sure that we get these things? Because we're going to have to pay them back at some point.
Well, I mean, it's also just in terms of process, right? Like, and back in March, it was $75 million, and you had to pay between $300 and $1,000. Now, another deal was made, and it's free. I don't think it's something that ends. I think it's something that like evolves, and I would even say the way that, you know, I think that the way that government often works is like you have tension, right? You have tension between activists and government. That tension actually brings like people to have to step up, right? And and have to do some stuff, right? And I think that and we can all admit that from this crisis, like a problem that had been going on since the 20s and 30s is now we have daylight to solve that in like 2 years, right? Like that's monumental. Not just that problem, but the thinking behind it. Because again, these are all on private property, and the mayor changed a law that, because in New Jersey it was against the law to have public money pay for private property, right? Like that was against the law. You couldn't do it, right? Mm-hmm. So there was an impediment to solving this problem that had been going on for years. The actual act of getting the law to change, to be able to use public money for private property, like we can both agree that's kind of like a sea change in thinking, because no one's screaming socialism right now, right? No one's saying, why are you like you've got mainstream politicians embracing an actually core socialist cause, as in we will use public money to deal with private issues, because that private property issue is not really private in terms of the problem. There are public health concerns that deal with it, right? So it shattered that. And I think that that's something that probably should be built on, right? Like universally built on. And so you're saying the federal government needs to get involved? Yes, absolutely, right? In terms of funding it now and all over the country. And I think that those are points of agreement that could happen. We have a phone caller. Jay Arendt?
Arena.
Jay Harina? Jay Arena.
Rulers in Newark and at the state and federal level to address this crime of poisoning Newarkers. But I have a couple questions. One is, Mr. Olson keeps emphasizing that only homes that have lead service lines are affected.
Or lead fixtures.
But in fact, there have been many homes that do not have lead service lines, but nonetheless have had high levels of lead detected.
Because they've had lead fixtures.
So I'd like to hear Mr. Moassab's perspective on that. The other thing is, Joe DiVincenzo, better known as Deportation Joe, has postured progressive on this bond initiative to replace the lead service lines. But we're going to end up paying for this. So I don't really see that as an effective response. The city,
but
the state was ready to. I want to hear Al's perspective. The state and city were ready to give $7 billion in welfare to Amazon, but they don't have money to fix up the lead service line. I'm going to hang up, and I want to hear Mr. Moassab's response.
But I just have a question for you also. Like, you're saying that, that we would have to pay for it, right? But isn't that just how taxation works? Like, whether it's federal, whether it's state, like we pay taxes federally, we pay taxes locally, we pay taxes federally, right? Like, no matter what, if the government pays for it, we have to pay for it. I don't really understand the question, but I'm just going to allow you to clarify, and then I'll answer. Like, what's the contention? Like, we're going to have to pay for it. That's just how taxes work, right? Whether we pay it federally, locally, state, like, we in some way are going to have to pay for it. Hello? Oh, I think he hung up.
Okay. So no, I mean, I think what we're saying though is that when you look at taxation, right?
Right.
The wealthy are not paying nearly as much as they used to, as a result of that. And so therefore the burden of replacing these things continues to fall more and more on the working class. And so that's where I think that the argument is, and this is out of the, this is federally, but there's also, when we continue to win people to the idea of tax abatements and tax credits, we continue to win people to the idea that it's okay for the billionaires to hold on to their profits. You know what I'm saying? Because in some ways in capitalism, we're servants to them, right? If we tax them, then they're going to take their capital and they're going to move it someplace else. And we're servants under capitalism. But if we can build a national movement and international movement to force more so nationally, to force these companies and these, billionaires to pay more, that's the difference, because it's going to fall on us eventually, as opposed to coming from the federal level.
And that's true whether it's local, state, or federal.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, just in terms of the way the tax structure works right
Absolutely.
now, like either the difference would just be the number of people who are burdening it, right? Like, if we're getting federal dollars, then that's just a greater pot, right? It's a greater pot of people who are giving to it. But I think that I just think that for many people are like, are we going to have to? The government's paying for it, but we're going to have to pay for it. And I'm like, yeah, that's taxes.
Yeah, but
but nothing's like, it's not like even. And I agree with you, right? Like, but I think that those are two separate issues. Like when you're talking about people having to pay, when you're talking about rich people having to pay more federally, nationally, locally, right? Like,
yeah.
That's true, but that's not. But that would be true whether or not this was paid for by Essex County or paid by the federal government.
Yeah, but if we have, for example, the millionaire's tax in Jersey, right? If we raise taxes, there's more revenue to do things like this by the government. And that's all I'm saying. Like,
right. That's not but I don't think that's in contention, right? Like, that's not that. Like when people are like, "Wow, we would have to pay for this," and they're directing that at either the county or the city. That's not. I mean, I think the city and county agree. Yeah, we want the federal government to pay for it, so it doesn't have to come out of, so that we don't have to eventually pay these bonds back in that way, right? Like, but at the same time, right? Like, if it wasn't a city bond or a state bond, it would be a federal bond, and it still comes. Tax paying is tax paying, right? At the end of the day, right? Like, it's all of us collectively saying that this private problem is actually a public concern.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really where like the question that I have or the pushback I would have on like, but we'd have to pay it back, because I don't think a lot of people recognize that we always pay for federal programs and state programs. Like, that is taxpayers. That is why we pay taxes.
Yeah, but when it comes from the federal, right? And if we increase the taxes on the billionaires, that's less of a burden on these. That's what I'm saying. So I just don't think. So I agree, but
we agree the tax structure sucks. Trump tax cuts suck, right? And the way in which we've been taxing for the last 30 years since Reagan probably like sucks for us, because like the wealth gap, everything you're talking about, absolutely true. I just think that that's still a point of agreement. I think if you talk to the mayor, if you talk to most of his team, they would agree with you. They'd be like, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, but then this $8 billion tax abatement. Now I understand that's different than having to pay for lines, but
$8
This
million
was all
tax abatement?
Isn't the $8 billion tax credits? What was it that
I'm not sure.
the city was going to give Amazon?
Oh, I don't.
You know what I'm saying?
I do not know all of that.
So this is, I mean, this, and like I said, this is not all about, personally attacking the mayor, but this is attacking the system that we live in. And, objectively speaking, the mayor, in some ways, is representative of capital. They have to be. They have to be. They have to work for capital.
But we do agree.
Yes.
Agree that he actually changed the entire way of thinking about that public-private distinction in a way that hadn't been done since the 20s.
In
so,
Jersey. Okay.
Right. Like, I mean, that's like
Absolutely.
he's like straight up like you might like real undercover socialism straight up that all mainstream politicians agreed with, like turning a crisis into opportunity for the city. Right?
No, yeah, absolutely. And I think you also have to look towards the movement to give them credit to push that forward. Those who have been fighting.
And I'm always like, yes, I applaud I applaud activism and movements because they push people to be better, and they push people to step up to whatever they need to step up and make a crisis into an opportunity, right? And I think in this case, I think crisis was made into an opportunity, right? But so I really very rarely ever go like activist bad. I'm of the point activist good, activism good. But at the same time, there's a way in which, like how the ACLU, they sued the city, and then there was a coming together so that we had the Civilian Complaint Review Board that is the most progressive in the country, right? And it seems like on a lot of different issues in Newark, the activists are helping to form policy. But when it came to water, there was a lot of contention, and I think that at this point, and there might have been a lot of different reasons in terms of communication for the stuff that happened before, but I'm like at this point, when we know that a major point of like the actual solution to the problem has been going on since the 1920s is getting dealt with, it seems like this would be a good time for the activists who are talking about various things to come together. Like some of the things you talked about are already happening, right? Like when you're like, hey, the Wanaco people in the Wanaco need to be tested, and the mayor's like, and the people from the city are like, they will test everyone for free. The difference would just be in getting the word out that everyone should have their water tested, which is what everyone
the difference
agrees on.
though is also setting up a water distribution center right now in the Wanaco. That's what we're fighting for until we see the samples decrease from July through December. That's the disagreement, yeah.
Well, but minor disagreement because anybody can get water from the other distribution centers.
Okay.
And as long as you just get your water tested. Like, the difference seems to be minor, right? Like, it seems to be something that, like, is not, like, there are times when there's points of contention and people are totally on the opposite side, and you just got to fight it out, right? But if the difference is, like, we all agree that water needs to be tested. The city says we'll test water for free. Like, if you show you can get water as long as you bring it back and you agree that we can come into your home and test it, right? Like, it seems like there's not a lot of daylight there, right? Like, there's not a lot of difference at this point.
There's not, but a lot of it is, and this is what we've had disagreements with since the beginning of this lawsuit, is the public education part of that. You know what I'm saying? Like, the city, they're great organizers. They are. Like, the Mayor Baraka is one of the best organizers I've ever seen. So, for us, we want to make sure that the Wanaco area, and I feel like, and a lot of this may just be anecdotal, and I understand there's limits to anecdotal evidence, but a lot of it is that those in the Wanaco service area still think everything is okay.
Okay.
And that and therefore there's no need to get the water tested. So we would like to see more public education. They did change their website recently,
and also
which is good.
This week, one of the things that the mayor did in terms of holding a meeting, in terms of with activists, was like, you need to go to all 18,000 homes, like not just like all 15,000, but all 18,000 homes, and tell them all 18,000 homes are eligible. And that means that he wants people to go door to door.
Great. No, absolutely. We're not going to. Yeah, we. I don't see a problem. That's great.
And
that's great.
That's what I'm saying. Like, not only does it seem like there's not daylight, it seems like you agree. Like, you're saying there needs to be more communication with people in the East Ward, but he wants to go door to door with all 18,000 homes, which includes the 3,000 in the East Ward. And if it's about education, like, activists do education well, right? Like, and that's part of the contention and part of my confusion on the issue was that I was getting one thing from activists that were like, don't drink any water. Like people, who I know who were like, all the water in Newark is bad, don't drink it, no matter what, it's poisoning you, right? Like all that stuff was coming out, and it just wasn't true, right? So a lot of what the activists, like what I expected from the activists to do was to give education that was accurate, right? And to have to dig, right, to actually even understand the issue is huge for me, right? Like in terms of that. So when we're at this point right now, it seems like there's just an opportunity to educate that everyone can have, but by education, you got to tell people actually like what the truth is, right? Like as in, everyone who has a lead service line, those lines should be replaced. And we have someone on the phone right now.
Jay Arena.
All right, Jay Arena. Hello, Jay, are you there? Jay Arena, you there? Jay Arena, you back? All right, so he's not back. So, but we'll have somebody else. We'll call him. So but yeah, so that's part of what. So that's part of what a lot of the issue was. Now, do we have someone else on the line? All right, Yvette Jordan, are you there? Hey, Yvette Jordan. All right, so what's up? What question do you have?
On what you were saying about a minute or two ago about how the activists shouldn't be really riling up so much, and that
that's not what I said, but it's okay.
The actual differences really are minor. That's what I was really taking away from
at this point, like right now. Just tell me, what are the differences?
Okay. I understand what you were saying, and my comment is the concern I think we have, and as a member of New Caucus I'm speaking, and that is that the logistical plan and the public education, even now, is at times not organized. And I have evidence of that from my own family when my aunt, who is elderly and homebound, she lives around the corner from me, and she asked for water, and she is still waiting for it. So, of course, other family members, we made sure she had water. It's just there are many instances, and it's not isolated. So my concern, and it's been an ongoing one, whether it is filters or now water, is an organized plan. And until it is organized and managed well, I think activists such as myself, Al, and anybody else will still rise up and say what is going on. So,
and stuff like that, I absolutely agree with, right? Like, if the city has said very blatantly that they will distribute water to people who come for it, right? They've said that. The governor has said that, right? So if that's not happening, and you're like, hey, that's not happening, then yes, I totally get that, right? Like, if you call to have your water tested and no one's coming to test your water, I get
exactly.
that, right?
And that's still happening. That is still happening.
And I get those complaints, right? And we're going to have people from the city on tonight, and part of the question will be like, in those logistics. But I think those are things that can be solved, right? Like, as in, before they were only given one thing of water or two things of water, now it's four, right? Like, I think the pushback can be very good in terms of making the logistics go well. But I think that's very different than, like, some of the stuff that I was hearing was, like, don't drink any water, all your water's poisoned, like, and that's where I'm pushing back on some of the bad information that came out that actually did, like, scare people, right? Like, and I think that's a legitimate criticism. So if the criticism is, hey, because my family went to get water and was turned away, right? And I think that there should be numbers you could call from the city to be able to complain about those basic things that the city said it was going to do, right? So I think all of those things. So I don't disagree with you in terms of, like, there are problems that need to be solved, right? my only pushback was there were a lot of different voices that were saying there were a lot of different problems that made things very confusing on this. Like, you're not picking, like, you need to be better at distributing water is not something that's controversial. That's not disinformation, right? Like, that's individual people's experience, and we can have, I think that the city needs to have that back and forth conversation about how things work. But I think that, like, so I'm not disagreeing with what you said in terms of either water being tested, and the city has said they would test everybody's water. They would test it for free. That was said multiple times. City said anyone who goes for water will be able to get that. But if you're not on the list, you need to allow them to come in and test your home and test your water, right? Like, that's all the stuff that I got, right, from them. So if that's not happening, then yes, pushback, calls, protest on that. But I think that would be more clear to me, right? Like, if it was like, hey, you said that you would give water, but here are all these people who are getting turned away. That's clear. And that's easy. To me, that's easy to fix, right? And that's where, like, I think activists and the city work together so that things are a lot more positive. Like, do you agree? Or, like, am I misinterpreting you?
I hear what you're saying, and ideally, I agree with you.
Cool.
I think one of the things is, I think there is still a level of distrust because of the last 2 years of struggle. You know what I'm saying? In terms of trying to get the word out. That and one thing I've always told reporters and others is, to me, this was never personal about Mayor Baraka. Like, and I've always said, when New Caucus was starting out, Mayor Baraka was one of the only principals who allowed us to meet in his school.
Right.
Even when the NTU didn't want us to meet.
Well, I mean, I started out with this, like,
Al,
you're very well known for, like, working, like, for kids, working for, like, the community from New Caucus. Like, Bashir knows you going from way back. Like, most people in the city know you as an activist for the stuff that you've done with New Caucus, and you've been around since Cammie Anderson protesting that, right? So, but I think that when you're talking about a lack of trust, I think that I think that there are opportunities that are being missed. And I think that the opportunities that activists have with this particular mayor are the same opportunities that the ACLU has, other activists has. Like, in terms of being able to help push policy beyond what the national standards, right? Like, I think that what the ACLU helped do with the other activists, like the Newark Anti-Violence Commission and all the police, the activists on, like, Zaid Mohammed, who's, like, in here. Like, I think that one of the things that all the activists have done on police brutality and police issues is they've made policing better in the city of Newark. We've gone beyond national standards when it came to that. The CCRB is beyond what most other people in the country have, right? It's a model for the rest of the country. I think that there is a real opportunity for activists to help, like, influence policy, practical policy, as in, like, where is the EPA with respect to the World Health Organization? And let's start talking about those standards and have a real conversation, right, about how to make things safer. Why not push the envelope? Why not, like, what are wrong with the EPA standards, right? Because there's always going to be some tension between government and activists. And I think that it's almost unique to be able to have, like, a potential activist government work with other activists on this issue. Because I think that there's just a lot of vitriol. And I think that when you're saying there's not a lot of trust, there's probably not a lot of trust on both sides in this issue, right? But I think that there's an opportunity. That's why I was asking, well, where's the daylight? What do you really disagree about? And at this point, right, and let's think about it. The city first got its notice in, like, 2017 in terms of this. And you're talking about, like, 2.5 years. In 2.5 years, we went from lead and water in terms of high numbers to having a permanent fix for a problem that's been around since the 1920s, 1930s. Like, I don't think we appreciate how much of a lightning speed that is in terms of a major problem and dealing with that major problem. Like, and again, activist, city, I mean, this is like working, pushing, and a year and a half, 2.5 years? And
well, it's even shorter if you look at when they actually had a mass education program about them. You know, it didn't really even come out till October 2018 from the city on a mass scale, right?
Okay,
So it's even then.
So you're saying that, like, basically less than a year we've gone through that. So when the city got on, like, you might disagree when they fully got on, or there might be some contention in terms of, you know, the city said they were testing, they were trying to make sure of things. Activists were like, no, you need to do this right now. By the time, you know, October 2018 happened, you're talking about dealing with this problem in less than a year? Like, come on. Like, at some point, activists should be like, yeah, we won. Let's go further. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm saying too much.
Not yet. Yeah, I mean, I think I think the lead service lines are in the ground. The lead levels are still very high. Right?
But I mean,
the fight's still, and this is not just about Newark too. I want to be clear about that. Like, that's what I'm saying. This is not just about Newark. Obviously, that's where we are, and that's what we can control. But this is a bigger fight. So I think we need to.
Which Newark is leading the way in, right? Newark is clearly leading the way in this because now Orange can do the same thing. Now Belleville can do the same thing,
Absolutely.
right? Like, all of these things can happen as a result of that. Now, Jay, we have Jay Arena. Are you back? Hey, Jay?
Yeah, so I somehow got cut off. But, one, I'd like to hear more from the activist than the interviewer who seems to be acting as a PR for the administration. I know they have hired a...
I'm just saying, I'm bringing up stuff, and I'm letting people answer, and we're agreeing, so...
Okay, but I think you've tried to downplay, talking about the interviewer, the significance of the difference between the administration and the activist fight.
So tell me, what is it?
Well, one is that this would have never been put on the public agenda if it had been from the work of the Newark education workers of AL and other activists. In addition, the group that I work with, the Jobs and Equal Rights for All campaign, we have made it clear that the rich need to pay for this, and we have proposed, just like homeowners pay a tax on their property, we call for a wealth tax on the wealthiest 1% and their corporations in New Jersey.
Why is that?
Pay for the cleanup of the water. Let me just finish. The cleanup of the water and all the other contaminants that we face in Newark and around the state. And furthermore, the politicians that Mayor Baraka lined up with at the press conference with Deportation Joe DiVincenzo, whose AAA rating is in part based on his blood money contract with ICE and the money that brings in. But he was lined up with people like Ileana Pintor-Marine.
So your problem with him is the personal politicians that he works with?
This is all connected. The state assembly person from Newark who heads the budget committee for the state of New Jersey, who opposed even the minimal billionaires tax that the...
Hold on, just let me get this right. Let me get this.
Nothing to really win that.
Can you let me get this right?
They're part of the problem, not the solution.
I'm just asking, right? Are you saying that the mayor should have rejected the deal with Essex County to remove the deadlines? Is that what you're saying? Because the people, the politicians, you know.
It's a crime. The rich are now going to make money off of this bond sale.
Okay, so
they created this poisoning. They created the problem.
So
the county is going to sell these bonds to the wealthy who are going to collect interest payments off of our suffering. No.
So you're saying you should have rejected that, right? You're saying, so what is the solution that you would have had?
The connection with Baraka, with the whole Democratic Party, who are on the other side of the interests of working class people in Newark and throughout the state and country.
So, Al, I have a question for you. Do you agree with him? Mayor should have rejected the deal because of the politicians like Joe DiVincenzo, the stuff that he should have rejected because there's a strong disagreement with their politics.
I don't think it's...
The question wasn't about Baraka rejecting. The point we're saying...
I was asking Al that.
Pay for this.
Well, right, but so he should have... Like, you can't have it both ways. So should he have accepted or rejected? I don't get it.
Listen, I think it's more... He's not talking about just this transition. I think from what I'm hearing, he's talking about just the entire relationship with the Democratic Party and what they've been doing. Personally, I think that right now we need lead service lines changed for free. We need renters to be able to force their landlords to change their lead service lines. But we should also, like I said, criticize the fact that these are coming from bonds. That's my position.
Right. So
you know what I'm saying?
We should do it, but
we
then
should be
try to
critical,
find.
and we should
Right,
continue to be
'cause if you-
critical of the fact that on the state and federal level have not come in to help us.
But you were not saying he should not have made this deal.
I don't think so. I think what we need right now is the lead service lines changed.
Right.
And
So if he made the deal, change him now. You
Yeah.
can get him done in 2 years. And if you want to, if there can be another deal
But-
that makes it faster or it alleviates the taxpayers more, then yeah, that. And again, I don't think there's anything.
But this
like
transition doesn't occur in a vacuum, right? This transition occurs, like we said, from a history of allowing the rich and wealthy to get off and us not having the funds to pay for this, right? You know what I'm saying? To be worked in a budget.
But where's
this
that?
is coming
But
from?
where's that a disagreement with like the mayor? Like the politics you're talking about are like.
I'm not.
They seem like it's
But
politics.
it's always not about the mayor. Like for me, it's not always about the mayor. You know what I'm saying? Like when you're saying disagreement with the mayor, I'm just saying this is a criticism we're raising.
But
Not everyone is directed towards the mayor.
what I've been pushing is activists in the city have a chance to work together and do things that are more progressive than any place else in the country. Like that's just been my thing from the beginning of the interview, right? Like I'm trying to find out where the daylight is
Yeah.
because it seems like there's this energy of working against each other when as of this point, right? Like the reason why I'm saying, and we kind of agreed on that, the reason why we're like, at this point, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of disagreement there. It seems like the interests of the activists, the interests of the mayor are very, very similar. And there's an opportunity, with crisis as opportunity, to, I think, go further, right? Like, just like the ACLU and other activists push police policy, I think that there's a serious opportunity for activists to push environmental policy in ways that are unique. Because we don't, like, environmental justice is a thing, right? Like ostensibly when you're talking about, like, us dealing with water, lead, air, there are all sorts of issues that are environmental issues that affect Newark. And whether it's old infrastructure or all this other stuff. And I think that this is an opportunity where instead of, like, and a lack of trust is to realize where tangibly are we together in this. I'm getting the thing. We're have 1 minute left. Jay Arena, thank you for calling in. Very much appreciate you, man. So thank you for calling in. Al, we are finishing up. We're ending up right now. So question: is there anything else that you would like to add with in terms of what is your like? Last week the mayor was like, he needs help with people going door to door. Like, he's calling on activists to go door to door to the 1,800 homes to actually inform people because he, I think, has the same comments that you had, that a lot of people don't know about it. And they've sent letters, they've done certain things, but they think that people do not know they're eligible for this program. Excuse me, which would mean they do not know that there are all sorts of education things. And he called for people to go door to door. Would the Newark Water Coalition be willing to help in that process of going door to door?
I can't speak for the Newark Water Coalition.
Well, would you be willing to do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I mean,
absolutely, I would go door to door. I mean, that's what we wanted to do with the filters initially. We wanted door to door, and I would be willing to go door to door.
Okay, so
absolutely,
and part of this is just looking at the sides of this, right, and saying, hey, at what point do we start working together so that we can have the most progressive policy in the country when it comes to this stuff? Because I think that replacing these lead water lines, I think that's something that's unique. I think that the public-private distinction that you're talking about breaking down capitalism and socialism in a certain way, then that's definitely it. Now, one more question for you.
Yeah, man.
One question. It's a question we asked everybody. You've never been on the show before, have you?
No.
All right, so who is your favorite hip-hop artist, individual group? This is All Politics Are Local, America's number one political hip-hop radio talk show. So the question, Al.
I mean, I
Favorite
still go with Low Key.
Low Key?
Yeah.
All right.
I like Low Key.
All right, Low Key.
Soundtrack to the struggle.
All right, cool. So that's what we have. And Al, man, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Right? I think this was I learned a lot in this interview, so I think this was good. So I think that hopefully there can be some good stuff going forward, man.
All right.
And good luck in all the stuff that you do, because you do a lot of really good work around the city. You do a lot of really good work for kids. And you know, I worked with you. You're also a debate coach.
We'll be traveling
so
together this
yes,
year.
we'll be working together a lot. So you know, good luck with all that, man. All right?
Thank you.
All right. So this is All Politics Are Local, America's number one political hip hop radio talk show.